Hang on. Hey, guys, are we ready to go live? We're going to go live, folks. We're live.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone, to the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for, what's the date today? July 25th at 9 a.m. And so we're going to kick it off today. We're going to start with the calendar, improving the calendar for the year and getting comments on that, talk about teaching and a teacher and principal pipeline, as well as there are a substantial amount of procurement items that we want to work through. A reminder for the listening public or whomever is that AJ, I'm just checking this with you at 5 o'clock today. We're going to be down here, and we're going to be doing a committee update. So for if those people who you know are dying to hear the teaching and learning and couldn't see it, they could come and get the committee update tonight, and then we'll talk about these procurement items as well.
That's right. And, I think one of the important things to note for tonight is that we also moved the consent agenda downstairs, and the board will not be considering the consent agenda until after the public comment. So the public comment will give their comment before the board votes on the consent agenda.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Great. Any questions on that about process? And then we can go to talk about the calendar. So I guess this is not a presentation, AJ, or do?
It's not a presentation.
From staff. We talk about it as a committee. Okay,
right.
Great.
And you approve it.
Yeah. I mean, the goal here is to talk about approving the calendar for teaching and learning. And so the process has been, we've looked at last year's calendar. We then, I actually spent some good time with AJ making kind of suggested edits, and AJ as well as the Joe have gone back and forth to kind of think about a balance of, what makes sense. My one kind of piece is like I wanted to, as we are rolling out our priorities on our blueprint of wholeness, of literacy development, as well as leadership, teacher and school leadership. I wanted to get kind of those updates and information before so it can inform our budget process that begins, as we know, kind of in the December-January timeframe. So you'll see topics kind of front-loaded there. And we've also said that we've evolved as a system of saying that there are fewer topics. So the topics that we do bring in, can we kind of dive in? What are the most critical ones to kind of to really dig into and get feedback and input on? And then there will be updates, but then there's some memo updates that the committee has. So we're not rushing through things, that we're spending time and diving into them that are aligned to the system's priorities. So I think we've done a good job, but we're open to kind of comment and feedback. And so this is to Commissioner Cheney and Commissioner Berkeley to kind of give some more input and feedback, and then we'll look to approve.
May I?
Yes, Commissioner Berkeley.
So I have two issues that I think are important for us to look at in depth when the time is right. One is media literacy. I think in this day and age, media literacy should be part of the core curriculum. So I'd like us to talk about that. So that's one suggestion. And the other is computer science curriculum. What are we doing? How are we doing? What are the opportunities for students to be trained in computer science? So that's another one that I want to make sure we pay good attention to going forward.
So when I look at that, I'm just looking at the calendar. I'm wondering is we could give guidance to staff to kind of bring that within a presentation that they're bringing. So let's take the media literacy. Do you want to kind of look during the?
I mean, when I'm looking, it could. I would imagine it would come as a part of the blueprint presentation around literacy.
Around literacy generally.
I think I would imagine literacy is more comprehensive than just reading. I don't mean that way, and then just reading in the classroom. And then your computer one, a couple of places, but definitely with the update on career and technology.
Yes.
Where's is that on the
I
April
see it
meeting?
in April.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's any sooner.
Hmm. Well, I think we put it in April to kind of make sure that we had some good.
And
Okay.
they're a
They're
little in November.
November,
around the
right.
Readiness outcomes.
the college and career readiness outcomes,
Mhm.
or the career and
What
technology
impact that
education.
might have, yeah.
I do feel like what you're talking about is exposure to computer science and how are we.
Yeah, sort of throughout the curriculum.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it is a career and technology issue, but ideally, we're not waiting until then.
Right.
What kinds of exposure, and it is an issue for many of our students. I mean, one of the divides in our society is that some people are exposed to computers from birth on, essentially.
That maybe we should, ask staff as they're presenting these areas, because then might be more of a resource and ways of implementing that curriculum and the materials and resources that are used to highlight those.
Yes, I agree.
Those
I think staff can decide where is the time to bring it in. It just, so it is an important issue, so.
I just was hearing from staff who's suggesting that we could add, in January, there's not much on the agenda, so we could add a presentation to cover both topics. That's a fairly light agenda, and so if we want to get into that in January, that would be a good time.
Does that sound good?
Yes,
My only hesitation is I don't know if it's a full presentation, but computer science, like, there's such a desire. I mean, people are talking about it. I mean, what are we doing around computer science? How are we preparing our students? And so that one makes sense. I do feel like embedding the media literacy and how we're approaching literacy overall, that could be incorporated and there's a blueprint opportunity through literacy on September. There's a September meeting, and then there's a January there's a January meeting there. We could add that to it doesn't have to be a standalone topic, is what I was saying. That could be
Right,
incorporated there.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
So is that what you prefer? You want it to be part of one of those other presentations as opposed to a separate agenda?
I think that makes sense for the media literacy piece.
Yeah, and I would defer to staff. I don't
Yeah.
want to be telling
Yeah.
staff how to do it, right?
I mean, my only challenge will be, let's see as we get closer. My only challenge is that, depending on where we are, the literacy could be quite a
Quite
comprehensive.
big. Yeah.
So it might be a lot to add on.
Right.
We also have some, at least one pending proposal that we might want to talk about if, if we were to get funding for that. So let's make sure we're going to talk about it in January and in what format. We'll decide
Okay.
as we get closer.
Yeah, your guys' call.
Good.
And but then I think what we're saying is computer science is a separate, like the overall approach to computer science. And you were saying January is good for that. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Commissioner Chinia, do you have any other feedback or input?
No, I guess the only one for me was just if folks are looking at this, to be certain that there's an understanding that in June discussion of performance data would be preliminary, because I don't think we would have final. Yeah, I just don't want, when you read it, it sounds as though we're
There's some
ready to
magical
give,
that
and
we're
I don't
going to
think
get
that we will be,
earlier.
yeah.
But what that performance data is, it's really the formative assessment data. So
Okay.
most of those assessments will already have been completed, because most
Okay.
of those wrap up in the April-May window.
Okay.
So do you want to clarify that,
I just think
Commissioner
it needs to
Chinia?
be, since
End
this
of
is
year
public, I just
formative.
think we just be clear about what it is we're presenting.
We can do that for what it's worth. That was sort of the intent of capturing the beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year, because it's all essentially looking at how our students are performing on those assessments. So I think we can certainly clarify it both on the calendar and certainly when we come forward with the assessment strategy and the proposal around it, just reminding folks that that's part of our rhythm of how we share out the information.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
I just want to clarify what we want that to say. end-of-year performance data. I mean, we tend to not put,
Formative, summative.
we don't put, explanations on any of this. So I want to make sure that I add on what it is that we add on what it is that you're looking for.
Do you have any suggestions, Teresa? Or Dr. Jones?
I mean, honestly, like, I'm comfortable with leaving it as is
Okay,
if
fine.
we are all have the shared understanding.
Idea of what
I
it
don't know that
is.
we need to be that more pointed and detailed on the calendar. So I'm comfortable with
Are you
leaving it
good
as
with
is
that
if the board
clarification?
is.
It's fine. I just, as I looked at
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
my
yeah.
first look was, oh, are we ready? And then, so I do understand what it is. As long as we are presenting, we're certain that people understand it. Don't change it just for that. No problem.
Okay, and I just want to make sure, and I'm just looking quickly, that we have the quarterly updates for special ed. We have our first, it seems like we have our first one November, and then our next one not until February, and then February, do we have
And then April.
April? So 3. Does that hit our, is that the right flow? We checked that before.
Right,
We
we're
do-
okay. I
we
mean,
do- 'cause-
sometimes
'cause-
we skip we do it inside the quarter.
Yeah.
And we did one in June.
Gotcha, so we hit this quarter.
Right.
I just want to make sure we hit this quarter.
Right, we
Great.
did hit this quarter, so then it would be too soon to do it.
Yeah, gotcha,
So November
So
would be
it's-
the right timing.
gotcha. Okay.
Can I, sorry, Jennifer Dell, Strategy and Compliance, can I also say that on the full board agenda, there is for June 2018, a full board presentation as well. So it would be 4 presentations for special education within the year.
So I think that's a really good point. Okay, so we'll have an April one here, but then June, like I like that. So then there's a space. That's not, I appreciate that. Good. Wonderful. So I'm going to suggest a move to approve the calendar, the teaching and learning calendar for 17-18. Do I have a second? Well, I move it. Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Okay, I'm sorry, I was just reading something, but I'm fine.
Oh, do you want to?
No, I was, I'm fine, I found it. I was looking at summer school and it said, the summer evaluation. I was looking to see where the plan was for the next year, but it's all there together.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
fine.
no, and it's doing it in January so that we can give guidance. It's good. Okay, great. Okay, that's 3.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you all. Let's move to pipeline update. Teachers and principals, school leaders. One of my favorite topics. Great. So is this Casey coming up? No. Allison.
Sorry. We skipped the
Go procurement.
Oh, there we go.
Good morning, everybody, and we're excited to be here to present an update about teachers and school leaders with regard to the pipeline. I'm DeRay, the interim human capital officer. This is Sarah Deal, the executive director of staffing,
Morning.
and Shauna Anthony, the special assistant in the office of human capital. Before we begin, this deck, so you've seen some of these slides already. You've seen them before. This is in response to questions that this committee had before. So we updated some of the information and are going to talk through principles in a way that we did not the last time.
Okay.
So the first slide is the objective. So we'll talk about an update on the teacher cohorts. This was an explicit question that came out of the last committee meeting. And then we'll also talk about the school leader cohorts. Slide 3. So we transition out about 10 to 15% of our teachers every year. This has been a trend for the last decade. It's a consistent trend in urban education in school districts of our size with our population and in cities. So that is not unusual. On the side, it shows the 3 reasons that people normally separate, either resignations, retirements, or dismissals in our renewals. There was nothing different about this year. Even with the RIF and the layoffs, this trend stayed pretty much consistent. More people didn't leave, which is what some people thought was going to happen. If anything, everything just happened a little later than it normally happened. But the numbers, there wasn't a spike like people had anticipated. The percentage is still the same.
DeRay, let me just interrupt for 1 second. Let's have you run through teachers, and then have people have their questions around teachers, and then we'll move to principals, okay?
Yeah.
So we'll just let DeRay run through. Great.
So based on the attrition trends, we hire approximately 600 teachers a year. It looks like that number for this year is going to be a little bit lower because, as you know, there were layoffs and there were budget challenges this year. So the number of positions in the BTU is just less. We won't know the new teacher number that we have officially hired until the fall after we hire everybody. But it looks like that number is going to be a little lower. In 15-16, we hired about 628 new teachers. In 16-17, we hired 518. We anticipate that number to be around 4 something for the upcoming year, but again, we won't know until we've actually hired everybody. And approximately half of the new teachers that we hire every year come from one of the 3 pipeline programs, BCTR, TFA, which are traditional pipeline programs, and then UT, which has a residency model. So we have a lot of residents in their first year who are not our employees, but work supporting teachers. And then the second year, they transition to be teachers. This trend is also normal. So we have about half or third, depending on the year, come from pipeline programs, and that has been a trend for at least the last decade as well. So here, this is in response to one of the questions that came from the last committee meeting. It was a question about what do the cohorts look like, and what does it look like when we recruit. So if you look at the 15-16 cohort, about 628 new teachers at the start of the school year. Here's the breakdown. So the majority of the teachers that we hired were traditional teachers, so they were not in an alternative certification program. We had about 126 from BCTR, 100 from TFA, and 37 from UTC. The UTC is our smallest cohort, as you can see. Teacher America and BCTR are also smaller than they have historically been. They were much larger cohorts before. The need changed, so we changed our relationship with them from a recruiting standpoint. And here are those numbers. And then this is the same breakdown, but just for the last year. So 518 new teachers. Again, traditional teachers are the single biggest group of people that we recruit. The urban teacher UTC number is pretty consistent, 37 last year, or 2 years ago, 34. BCTR and TFA consistent for the past sort of 4 and 5 years at this sort of 100 number. About 5 to 7 years ago, it was around sort of 200. It was in the upper 150, 170 for both of those programs, but the need changed. So you think about programs like BCTR, we no longer recruit art teachers from BCTR, for instance. We used to get art teachers from them. The need is not what it was before, or it hasn't been over the past couple of years. The pipeline programs are also much better now at making sure that their teachers are dually certified. So there's just more flexibility with their staff. So we can place them as elementary teachers or special ed because they are dually certified across a host of areas.
All right, so this slide is the new teacher cohort for school year 16-17, broken out by job title and certification area. So as you can see, we hired 518 teachers for the start of last school year, and you can see the breakdown both in numbers and percentages by job title and core content area. As you can see, the majority, or a large percentage, 43% are teacher elementary that we hire, and approximately 26% are secondary teachers. And then the next largest area is we hire about 15% of new teacher special ed for last school year. All right, so this is a specific look based on an ask from the last meeting about sort of what specifically the cohorts bring in. So at the start of last school year, you can see that BCTR brought in 112 residents, TFA about 97, and then UTC 34. And you can see the core content areas for what the pipelines brought in. So last year, the 3 cohorts combined brought in about 108 elementary teachers. They brought in about 25 English teachers, 24 math teachers, and then a significant number of their folks are dual certified. Urban Teachers actually has all of their interns or teachers dual certified in special ed. So you can see that there were about 45 special ed teachers that were brought in through the cohorts for the start of last school year. All right, and then we wanted to give you a sense of what is to come, what folks are bringing in this year. So this is a similar look by core content area for the residents for the start of this year. So as DeRay was indicating, some of the numbers are a little bit lower than in the past. So the projections for this year for BCTR are 71 residents. TFA is projected to bring in 92 core members. And then again, urban teachers is relatively flat at 35. And as DeRay said, everybody is really seeking to be as flexible as possible. So Teach for America is making every effort to have all of their core members be dually certified so that when they're placed, they're able to meet the greatest need, which is really fantastic.
We no longer have the hiring guarantee with any of our pipeline programs, so we place where there is defined need at the time of hiring. We used to have a hiring guarantee. If you remember, we had it for a very long time here in the district with BCTR and TFA. We no longer have the guarantee. That, I think, is some of the reason why the numbers have changed a little bit, because they need to make sure that people are placed. We are no longer making the commitment to place all of them regardless of defined need in that moment. We do experience attrition during the year, so we feel confident that we will have a place for all of these teachers given the attrition that we face during the school year.
So last time there was a question, we reviewed the attrition trends overall, but there was a question about how this looks by pipeline. So I'm just going to walk you through this chart. I know it's a bit detailed. If you look at the far left column, we've indicated the pipeline. The population in this chart represents the 15-16 cohort. The next column over shows the number of teachers that we brought in that year. So if we look at the first line, for BCTR in school year 15-16, we brought in 126 people. If you go to the salmon-colored column, we show that in that first year, 28 of those teachers separated from the district, which represents 22% of the cohort. When we look at the second year, an additional 15 staff members left from BCTR, which represents another about 12%. And if you go to the far right column in the yellow, that reflects a total of 43 separations from that pipeline group, or 34%. So we just wanted to show, I would pay attention to the yellow column. You can see that the 2-year separation rate, it's highest for TFA, which we've seen before, and UT is a low number. Again, we want to frame that in it's a very small cohort size, so those trends vary depending on who's in the cohort. And these are trends that we will continue to monitor, but it is something that was interesting. Again, it's only 2 years of data. And it's important to frame this that at any given point in time, when we look at all of the teachers across the district, they have an average of 10 years of experience. So although we were focusing on pipelines, and this, there are some trends here that we have to keep an eye on, it's important to note that most of our teachers do stay longer. And then this next chart is similar, but this looks at the 16-17 cohort, so only 1 year of data. So if we look again at the top line, we have the pipelines on the far left. So BCTR brought in 112 teachers in that first year. And of those 112, 23 separated, or roughly 20%. So you can see the trend stayed roughly the same. But again, this is only 1 year of data.
So now we want to talk about strategies that we have to recruit and develop first-year teachers. The first bucket is to make sure that we are working with our partners to ensure that people are certified in the end. So working with the local institutes of higher education to make sure that there's specific coursework and that they have what they need, leveraging those partnerships to make sure that it's actually focused on teaching our students and not just delivering sort of a set curriculum. And then the praxis is something that has been historically hard for some of our teachers to pass. So we have a set of teachers that always struggle with it. Sometimes we offer them conditional, sometimes we don't, but we want to make sure that they are supported through that process. There's some technical things that have changed with the way the praxis is scored that has particularly become a challenge in the past couple of years for some of our teachers. The second is identify and engage student teachers in city schools. So have been working over the past 4 or 5 years with the academics office to just be more thoughtful about placement. So instead of student teachers just going anywhere they want, there's a process now between our office and academics to make sure that they are going to schools that have a demonstrated capacity to support them. And that is something that we're continuing to do across the district. So there's a new Office of Organization Development that came about 2 or so years ago that sort of centralizes the way that we support all staff members outside of the content area. So academics still manages all content-based support, but this office manages the other supports that teachers receive, so mentoring, any support around evaluation and coaching, that all is in one place now as opposed to spread across the organization. And then continue to leverage the expertise in the Office of Teaching and Learning around content and making sure that that is both based on practice and is clear feedback to teachers so that we can improve the way that they deliver results to kids. And that is the teacher portion.
All right, welcome, Commissioner Hubbard. Questions?
I'm still digesting. There's so much information. Thank you for this.
I've got some technical ones and some big picture ones. So there were 7 teachers on vocational, can you just kind of talk about that, or even come back with that? What are we hiring on the vocational side?
I think we should come back to the specifics. So vocational is very, very specific. So every year we're always seeking nurses, we're seeking folks in computer sciences, it could be EMT, it could be law. So I think that we should circle back with sort of those specific content areas for the vocational.
Yeah, what I'm interested is kind of like the fields of the future that we need to preparing our kids for, and are we hiring the teachers like computer science that are coming in and helping our, working with our students? So I was just kind of wondering that.
And Commissioner Canham, it might be, remember, we are executing the vision that is already set by the academic team. So if your question is about what is the district's commitment to vocation and what does that look like over the long term, then we wouldn't be necessarily in the best position to answer that with regard to staffing. What we can tell you is like that we know the number of nurses that we hire every year.
Right.
We know the number of engineers.
No, I hear you. So it'd be helpful to know just like that breakdown of those 7, like who are we and where do they go? Because that would be helpful to understand.
Sure.
Do you have a question? I do as well, but go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm still sorting out my questions.
I know you said that the data around the attrition was preliminary, just a couple of years, but in terms of within the separations, anything, as you look at it, have you done anything to differentiate between those folks who just resigned versus those folks who are non-renewed? Is there any more of a breakdown than that in terms of the people who have left?
So with the cohorts, we work very closely with the cohorts to monitor their progress. So with BCTR and TFA, they are in the program for 2 years. So when people leave during those years, we are aware of what's happening with them, with the program. We can go back, and I don't know if we disaggregate the data internally. We can work with the programs to figure out the difference between the people that were removed for performance versus the people who left for, like, teaching wasn't what they thought it would be, or those sort of things. We can see if we can do a deeper dive on that. We do monitor them case by case with the pipeline programs because we work so hard to recruit them. So every time somebody leaves, in the past couple of years have actually been much better. We've had very little attrition from the people that have started in the first day and left recently. Whereas before, I think about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we had a lot of attrition in those first 2 years with the pipeline programs, and we just haven't seen the same level of people not being able to stick it out during the year. I think we have seen people leave at the end of the year, but we used to experience a lot of people leave like at Christmas, which was a whole different burden for the district in terms of staffing and the impact on kids.
Mm-hmm. And I get this comment that I'm going to make really cuts across everything, not just those particular programs, but some of this, but hopefully would also tell us something about the type of support we probably want to have in place for any new teacher. When we're looking at maybe like 40% of folks who aren't making it through the first year or two. So again, and then my other question had to do with you were mentioning about placement of student teachers, and again, how much or to what extent are we now working with our university partners in terms of the types of students we need and developing the locations and things for where students may serve?
So working closely with them as a part of the autonomy model, we don't, it's not prescriptive, right? So if you want to be a student teacher, we don't make you go through a certain process. What we have done is that we work with specific schools and we will match them up with the university partner and create pipelines. So it's just much more streamlined. And we're continuing to build out that network of schools that have have committed on the front end to being partners with a cohort of student teachers, so it's not so random. Because what it used to be is like, I want to be a student teacher, and I like email a random school, and I'm like, do you need a student teacher? And then that's how it would be, and the support that they would get and the guidance would be inconsistent at best. So we worked to tighten that up a little bit. But it is not all the schools have a relationship with the university partner. A set of them do, and we're trying to build that out.
Okay. Did you, Commissioner Highcupboard? I have a few more. I have questions as well, but if you're ready now. Could you said there was just one piece around the praxis piece, that there's a change. Can you just say a little bit more about that? There's a praxis issue that's inhibiting our teachers to gaining certification. What did we learn?
So you used to, for the core praxis, like the basic praxis that like an elementary teacher would have to take, it is in a range of subject areas. It's like a holistic test. And if you had a high enough score in the SAT, for instance, you would pass it, right? And now you have to actually have a high enough score in the subsection of the SAT. So there are a lot of elementary teachers, for instance, who are failing because they can't pass the math portion. And their overall SAT score used to be enough. They just passed the whole test. But if the math...
Meaning they wouldn't even have to take it? I mean, what do you mean your SAT?
They would waive out of it.
They would waive out of it. Oh,
Yeah.
I never knew that. I thought all teachers had to sit for the praxis.
There were ways that people could waive out of parts of the test. So now people are failing. That is sort of the takeaway message, is that people's score on the subsection of the math is not high enough to waive out of the part of the praxis that they would have otherwise been able to waive out of. So the support that we've had to work with the pipeline programs and just in general to provide people is just different, because they are, if you're an elementary school teacher, and some of you have taught, they might be very good at one part of the work and not very good at sort of higher level math, and they are not able to pass the praxis. So we've been strategizing, because this is a relatively recent change, to try and figure out what do we do with those teachers? How long can we keep them? What does it mean to keep them? When does support end? That whole conversation.
Got you. That was news to me. I did not know that. Okay. I wanted to go to the attrition slide on slide number 10. But first, slide number 9. I do feel like it's of note that in some of our core critical shortage areas of secondary science and math, that our pipeline programs are filling that need, and that there is a real focusing. So I really appreciate that. When you look at the number of math teachers that are coming from these programs, so I really appreciate the work that you guys have done to focus the cohorts on where we have the greatest need. So that's just a comment, but I appreciate that's a lot of hard work, and that's a lot of working with those programs. But going on the attrition, can I just make sure I'm understanding this on the separations piece? So if I'm looking at BCTR, this is after year 1, year 2, year 3. So after 3 years, I'm not fully understanding the.
Sure, there's a lot in here. So it's after 2 years. So these folks came in at the start of school year 15-16.
They started 15-16, okay.
So if you look at the salmon color column, it shows how many folks left in that first.
I don't know that. When you said salmon color, I don't know what the color salmon is. You said that a couple times. I'm like, I eat salmon.
Have you ever eaten the flesh of a salmon?
The third column.
Which one salmon is it? The first.
Pink.
Pink. Okay. Okay. I think I'm going
Peach.
colorblind.
Do you familiar with peach?
That's
No, I don't know. I thought it could have been the first. No, I know it was the yellow one, but it could have been. Okay. No, I'll go.
Okay, so the pink column
The
shows
pink
how many
column, okay.
folks left in that first year. The
Okay,
gray column.
within the first year, within their, so 126 BCR teachers start, and by the end of the first year, 22% have left.
Correct. And then if you go to the gray column, the next one over, it shows how many folks left in that second year. So an additional 15 teachers of the BCTR cohort left
Did
by the
not
end of the
complete
second.
their second year.
Or by the end of their second year.
Or
they
by the
left.
end.
Correct. And the yellow column on the far right shows the cumulative number of folks who left during their first and or second years.
Okay, got you. Yeah, no, ask your question. Your question is relevant to this.
Yeah, so thank you. On this particular slide, since we're on this one, it says separations. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean they left the district? Does that mean they were promoted to a different position? Because that's what my second question to follow up on that is, I hear this is a pipeline for new teachers, but what's our pipeline for teachers sort of coming out of the actual classroom versus, say, a teacher leader position, that kind of thing, where I don't see anything in the presentation about sort of the movement of a teacher within the sort of teacher space.
Yes, that's a good question. So this focuses on folks who left the district, not upward mobility or moving elsewhere in the district.
Okay.
And
And
we called,
it accounts for, like, if you change schools, that's not on here. It's really separation with the district.
correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, that we included separations because we looked at all leave types, so if it was voluntary, if they chose to resign, or if we terminated them for performance, all of those separations would be included in these numbers.
Be interesting to know what the difference is between our selective termination and their willingness not to stay. I'm just curious.
Yeah, we can look at that. And remember, with the pipeline programs, most of these people, unless we non-renew them, some of them don't successfully complete the program, so they're like removed from the program, and because they're no longer in the program, they cannot be our employees anymore. So we can tease that out. We should be able to do that. And then with regard to the mapping of mobility in the district, this was sort of specifically around sort of the recruitment and the pipeline. We can come back and show what that looks like for teachers. Obviously around the contract and what that allows with the lead teachers, the model teachers, that whole process is the most formal process that we have in the district right now for transitions out of the classroom or within the classroom and still leading.
Yeah, as we talk about blueprint and leadership being one of the key pieces of it, I don't want folks, one, to think that they have to come out of the teaching piece of the work to be in leadership roles, right? And I think our teachers need to be very clear what process they could be to become a principal or if they want to be a teacher leader, how does that work? I think folks sort of have the desire to do that, but don't necessarily know how to connect to that process. So that's why I asked the question.
I think it's a great question because that's where my next one goes is like, so my headline on this slide is that we have 40% of our teachers leaving after 2 years separating from the district. And so just when you step back and think about strategically, where do we need to go? Like where should we be investing our time and energy in keeping our best? Because that's what we want to do long term within the system. Like, can you kind of just share some of your reflections and then where you think we should focus our time and energy to decrease this number?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is the front end. So how do we so elementary is a great example of, elementary is the single biggest, let me see. Elementary is the single biggest cert area in the country. So more people are certified in elementary than anything else, and it is one of the biggest areas that we hire in. The challenge, though, is that we do not always experience teachers wanting to teach here for whatever reason in elementary, right? Which is why we still hire so many from the cohorts, because the need is still real. And we, even this year, will be hiring up until very close to the first day of school. And some of that is just hard for schools, right? So if you try to do PD over the summer and you get hired, August 21st, then that is sort of a challenge, right? So how do we do some of the front end work just a little more thoughtfully? And this is not just us, but it's like us and the university partners. Like, what does that process look like? I think that is like one that we have gotten better at, and we made sure that schools open staffed. I think that there's still some questions around like what is the best way to do it that we've not yet nailed. And I think some of it, frankly, is that there are teachers who want to teach in surrounding areas and play in content areas like elementary, where we just need to hire so many teachers. And that is hard. That's just like a hard thing. We've done much better on the sciences and things like that than we have before. We are nervous about English, for instance, this year. We have more English teachers wanting to work here than we have English vacancies, which is like this interesting thing. Physics, as you know, we changed the physics curriculum, so next year physics will be required. We are trying to plan right now to make sure that we can meet the need for what happens when so many more schools have physics teachers, whereas they currently don't. So like the forward planning stuff we're trying to get in front of, and physics is a great example. There's some things that are just always hard, like English and social studies. Sometimes we hire nobody in English and social studies. Some years we need 15 teachers, and this year is a year where like it looks like we have a little bit too many English. Like it looks like we have more people in pipeline programs and positions for English, and like that is a challenge. In terms of the other things with the hiring and what does it mean that so many people leave, I think that mentoring, we have a mentoring program. It is site-based mentors, so it's not like pull-out mentors. So I think I was in number 2 human capital in Minneapolis, and there was a set of people who all they did was mentor, right? That was their entire job all day long. They were par mentors. That's a different mentoring model. We have a mentoring model where it's somebody in the school who has another full-time job who also supports teachers, and I think some places that works out really well. Some places it works out not as well. So I think they continue to think about how we do mentoring. We do our most front-end support for new teachers at New Teacher Institute at the beginning of the year, and then schools manage it for the duration of the year, mostly. There's some schools that are much better. There's some school leaders who can do school-based PD really well. There's some people that struggle. So I think that Dr. Santelises has made a commitment to try and figure out how do we create blueprints and sort of samples so schools can do site-based PD in a more thoughtful, consistent way across the district, as opposed to sort of just doing it, many ways. I think that they might be some of the highest levers. I do think that there is this conversation about what does it mean to teach in a place where kids have experienced trauma so much, and I think some teachers are much better at it than others, and we've seen a lot of teachers after their first year just not know how to process what it means to teach in a place with kids just have different needs, and that was not, and it's hard to train for that too, we found. So I think that is, and that's a part of the blueprint conversation. I think that will be an important thing, and how do we create networks of them outside of the cohort? So as any of you who know the cohorts know that there's already a built-in network. That network doesn't exist for traditional teachers, and we've seen that actually be a real challenge for traditional teachers. What does it mean that, if you went to Morgan, it's not like all the Morgan teachers get together every 2 weeks and do something like TFA does or BCTR. So we've been trying to think about how do we recreate that sort of cohort model with traditional teachers, because when they don't feel supported, they don't really have a place to go right now. That's like a natural network, whereas TFA, BCTR, and the UT does.
Yep. I think also, to be honest and say that some people shouldn't come back.
Yes.
I don't want to be crass about it, but the reality is we have folks that shouldn't be with our children. And if we discover that as early as possible, that's the best thing for our kids. So, that's why I asked the question about sort of separation between our choice to separate versus people not staying with us. We want to keep the talent, and if we bleed talent, that's a problem. But we also want to identify those that are not good for our kids and make sure they're not in classrooms, or they're being coached effectively so they can either be coached up or coached out.
Yeah.
So I just think it's an honest conversation we need to have to make sure we're understanding that it's not just who's leaving us, rather we're making decisions about who's best for our kids.
So is that a question of the 40%? You've brought up two things. Of the 40%, that's overall, how many are being counseled out? How many are being
I asked
leaving?
them to find that, yeah.
And how many are going up too? Like who are getting other positions within the districts? And so we could, that would be helpful to know.
And we do have we hire very close to what the need is and a little bit over in preparation for the first day, because historically we have a set of resignations on the first day. Like, people go to school and they're like, I don't want to teach anymore, which is a nightmare for us from a staffing perspective, and it's a nightmare
How
for the school.
often does that actually happen?
It happens a little bit less now, but it used to happen much more. So we have a whole process for the first day to make sure that we can account for that and make sure that we can sort of move quickly. So those sort of things are like interesting things that people don't often talk about, but it is like a real challenge that schools, you think you're fully staffed, and then the kindergarten teacher literally walks in and is like, I don't think I can do this, and then leaves, and schools aren't prepared for that. So we have developed a strategy to respond to that. I bring that up because it factors into how we staff and how we prepare for the beginning of the school year with the new teachers. So there's some people, when we look at the numbers, it's like the resignations that happen in the first month are very different than the resignations that happen in the 6th month, right? Like, just different. It's a whole different set of circumstances. So we do hire very close to and a little bit over the actual number of need in the beginning, so that we can account for those things that we know are going to happen.
Can I ask, what do we do when that happens? Like, based on breaking contract, how do we respond to that?
We tell people that they can resign immediately, we will work to terminate them as quickly as possible, or they can go back to school. So some people are just like having an emotional moment. I remember there's one teacher, I was in the front of the human capital, she came in, it's 8:30, I'm like, hey, why are you here? It's Thursday school. And she's just like, I can't teach those kids. And it's like, well, that's interesting. And we had a conversation. It's like, well, you can go back now and we can just say that this was like a hard morning, right? or you won't be able to work for us. Like, I'm not moving you to a new school. Like, that's just not how this works. And we had to terminate her, but those happen. It used to happen enough that we have like a whole strategy around making sure that like if that happens again, we know we can just send somebody. Whereas when that happened 4 or 5 years ago, the school was in a real bind that day. So we come in like at 6 a.m. We have a set of subs that just sit here. They wait for that to happen. We go move them. It's like a whole process now.
So can we just talk about, I mean, what the public knows about is how many anticipated layoffs that we had, and then what actually teacher positions that we ended up laying off, but then we're hiring new teachers like this. Could you just kind of walk us through how everything is shaken down as of July 25th?
So in BTU, we laid off, and the numbers are, I'm going to start at the number of people who were initially notified, and it's a little bit in flux now because we may have to recall as we continue to get attrition. But we laid off 34 members in BTU, and that was across specific content areas for which we had more people than positions in that content area. It's important to remind folks, because I know it is a little confusing or jarring that we both laid off and are hiring significantly.
Right, I want to just clarify that.
Right, and so that's because when we implemented the layoffs, it was by subject area and the need in that subject area. So for example, we laid off in the library subject. In library, we had more people than positions for library. In the areas where you see, if we go forward to the slide where we project out our needs for 17-18, in somewhere like math, we know that we have more positions than people, so we anticipate hiring math despite the layoffs in some of the other subject areas. So that's why both can coexist, the layoffs and the additional need for hiring. We are continuing to monitor the landscape closely because there are recall rights for up to 2 years for the BTU. So as the landscape shifts, if staff resign or even move to a different subject area, then we would look at folks who are on that recall list who are just laid off and see if they're eligible to be recalled back to their previous position.
And the way that we were able to make the number so low in the BTU is that anybody who was dually certified, we essentially accounted for that other certification and held a position for them, which has worked out. Mm-hmm. It's good. There are some people, because we have autonomy with the way people can go into positions. If you were a guidance counselor who was also certified in English, and we held your position as a guidance counselor, but during the voluntary transfer period, you decided you wanted to teach English next year because you can, that now frees up a guidance counselor position, and we will recall one of the guidance counselors. So we are going through that recall process right now. It looks like we'll be recalling a small set of people in the BTU, and they will get that notification before the first day of school. But we didn't lay off in any area where there was need, because that wouldn't trigger a layoff. So that's where we are today. If people resign or retire, that might open up vacancies, but it looks like guidance is the only area of the areas that we laid off in right now where we know we will probably do recall because people have moved a little bit.
Okay. I just think we can't, well, as we're consistently communicating, because you're right, balancing those two things in your head, we're laying off, but we're hiring as well, and why. Mm-hmm. And I think we have a very clear rationale, but just to continue to communicate in that is really important. Okay, are we ready to transition to principals?
Yep.
Dr. Berkeley? Okay, thanks.
So principals. So each school year, about 11% of our principals leave city schools, an average of 20 per year over the last 5 years. Again, this is the 3 reasons that people leave, and we call this separations or resignations, retirements, and dismissals and non-renewals. What is important to note about this upcoming year is that a lot of things are different. One is that we essentially put a hold on hiring into AP roles at the very beginning when I first got back, and Dr. Santelisis and Allison as chief of staff, because we knew that layoffs were likely going to come. So the number of people that we moved into pizzazz as APs was just smaller this year than it's ever been, and that was the right decision that we made, because we still had to lay off 25 or so APs, or that's what we thought was going to happen. We have successfully, at today's PEP, we will have placed all of the APs into positions, so that is good. So we will not be triggering layoffs in pizzazz for APs if we can successfully get through the PEP, which is, the PEP is a special thing. So we'll have that done today, which we're excited about. So that is good. We hire about 20 new principals every year. So 26 new principals in 15-16, 22 new principals last year. Again, this is really people new to the principal role. So this doesn't mean like necessarily external people. This means people new to the principal role. This also is a combination of like interim principals and managing assistant principals is sort of all in this bucket. You know that a permanent principal is principal, how people use it. A managing assistant principal and interim principal are functionally the same. The only difference is the title based on what certification they have. So one is certified to be a principal, one is only certified to be an AP, which is why we call them something different. We recruit principals through two pipelines. The one is new leaders, so we always bring in a cohort of around 10 new leaders residents a year. And then the traditional pipeline, so that is often people who are internal, who have been teachers or APs. We allow every person in the district to sit for the Principal Assessment Center. So if you are certified to be a principal and you want to go through the Assessment Center, then we let you go through the assessment center. If you pass the assessment center, you're on the eligibility list. This year, we maintained a list of about 60 to 70 people during the hiring process, which is one of the biggest lists that we've had in a long time. So that is strong and that is good. And then, as you know, with the school-based process, schools interview about 3 people a piece. So it's not. This year was a particularly hard year for principal selection because there were so many APs who were initially notified they were going to be laid off. It dramatically increased the number of people who were vying for principal positions. So historically, where the new leaders residents would most likely find a spot somewhere just because they were really competitive and we had invested in them, they were just everybody was up against one of the most competitive pools that we've had in a very long time in the principalship. So there was a specific question about the Aspiring Principal Program, which is what the New Leaders Program is called. The chart below will show you sort of how people moved. So in 14-15, there were 9 people in the program. Those arrows show you that in 15-16, 6 of those 9 became principals, and then 3 of those became APs. 15-16, there were 10 people in the role. In 16-17, 6 of them became principals, 4 became APs. We don't have a chart yet for next year, partly because the PEP is not approved yet, and some of these people are on the PEP. But what is different about this year is that we were only able to place one, and we use place loosely. All of these people have gone through a selection process. The CEO only technically placed 3 or 4 principals. The rest were chosen by an internal process. Is that the majority of the principal residents this year are not going to be school leaders next year. Only 1 is being recommended to be a school leader. And again, this is only because of the competitiveness of the pool, not a reflection of their ability and talent. The other ones will go back to being teachers next year because of the layoffs in the AP pool. So 14-15, 9 principal residents. This essentially is what we showed on the other chart. And then this 18 slide. So for 17-18, this is what it looks like. It looks like right now there are going to be 17 new principals. 12 were internal, 3 were external. We'll have to update this based on the PEP today. As you know, we placed the vast majority of all of the principals by July 1st. We have a couple people left who will be on this PEP who were either late resignation, so they resigned after we had done the last PEP. And remember, over the summer, it's hard for us from a staffing perspective in Pizzazza because they have to be board approved. And there is a PEP today, and the next PEP is not until August 22nd. So any principal who is not on today's PEP, they will be appointing a principal very, very close to the first day of school. So we worked really hard to get people on this PEP because they need to be. But remember, we don't dictate the process for charter schools. So you'll see today's PEP has a lot of charter school principals on it because they get to determine the timeline that they want for their principal selection. So traditional schools, we have much more. We manage that process soup to nuts. So there are a couple traditional school principals on the PEP today. They're only on the PEP this late because something happened, somebody resigned or somebody moved later than we had planned. In the charter schools, they wanted to get their person on the, we told them this is really like the last PEP before school starts because August 22nd should be like our last resort PEP. But all of this to say that these trends are consistent. Nothing is abnormal about this year. The only sort of abnormal thing, if there was one, is that we were able to place so few principal residents moved into school leader roles. We are going to keep them in mind, and they're still on the eligibility list for if vacancies arise during the school year. And we do plan to start principal selection for the 21st century schools that will go online in a year. We're planning to start that process in January and February, so we will see some movement earlier than normal for next year. That is the presentation.
Great. So I just have I have a few questions, but a question just directly on that, on the principal residents. So we've invested all this money in their training, and then now they're back as a classroom teachers. There's no AP because, can you just say that one more time? There's no AP positions, because normally when they were in place and they didn't get secure principalship, they would go after training to an assistant principalship or assistant principal level. I mean, my worry is that we've invested a lot of time and energy in developing them to go back to the classroom, and then they're going to leave the system. So it's kind of like, so can you just sort that? So there's no assistant principal level positions or director type of positions because they're filled, basically.
Yeah, so director is a different qualification.
Yeah.
But we laid off about 25 assistant principals.
Right.
And when everything was said and done, there were about 25, 26 vacancies, because the way the layoffs happened in Pizzazz is it was by school. So say, for example, there were 2 APs at a school, and the principal cut one of the positions. The least senior AP was laid off. Like, that's how the layoffs worked, according to their contract in our conversation with Pizzazz. So that happened. Then when we regrouped and looked at all of the vacancies, what positions people had created in that whole process, it looked like there were like 26 positions that had been created in the end of the day. So what we did is that instead of actually telling people they weren't going to be that they were going to be laid off, because we notified them like, you were likely going to be laid off, and then we said, now that we know the actual vacancies that have arisen, let's look back and see how many positions, and there was almost a 1-to-1 match. So that is what happened with the APs. Some of these people were eligible to be principals, and again, they just were in a really competitive pool, and they didn't rise up. So some of them interviewed at schools, but it was just a competitive pool. So that was different about this year. We normally have AP vacancies. We normally have normally they're competitive in the principal pool, but some of the residents who, like, this was their first year in a leadership role in schools, they are now vying against a 20-year AP that got displaced from some school, right?
Not because of performance, just because of,
it was just
because
like
it
a
got bumped.
hard year for performance. So what we are going to do is keep them in mind for vacancies that arise. So we know that APs will quit during the year, they'll retire, they might get let go. Like, these things will happen. Again, we are carrying significantly less people on surplus than we have before. So if this was 5 years ago, we would probably just carry these 5 people surplus. We'd assign them to a school that had some difficulties, and we call it a day. We aren't doing that with people this year because of the budget scenario.
No, I hear that, and I just think it's just important. Like, we've invested in them, their time, their energy. They want to commit to the system. This is a way to kind of value them, and it's like we want to do with all of our employees. It's just because they are our bench that you can tap. So, anyway, that's one thought. Go ahead, Dr. Ms. Ginio.
But I did hear that. I'm sorry. So is there a cohort this year that's moving into the internships with aspiring?
Yes.
And how large is that cohort?
It's the same size. It's about 10, 11 people. They're on the PEP tonight. I think it is 11 people, not 10.
Okay.
So just from your perspective in your leadership role, developing our principal pipeline AP position has been a critical piece of our pipeline historically, given that we have layoffs, given that schools are doing site-based budgeting, and so they're deciding if they want AP roles or not. I'm just curious your thoughts about how this impacts our pipeline overall in years to come, because if we have less APs in general, we're then giving less opportunity for folks to move into a leadership role before they become a fully vetted principal. And as you clearly stated, that someone who's in for the first year ready for principal may not get the job because the pool is more competitive. So I'm just wondering, how does that impact our pipeline moving forward, and what should we be thinking about for next steps in terms of leadership development for school leadership roles?
Yeah, I think that this year is an aberration. I don't think we have never seen this much movement in the AP role ever. So we probably have brought forth like 50 moves in the AP role this year, and that is unusual. We have not seen that before. Dr. Santelises on the last PEP was Roxanne Four, who was a principal at CISO for a very long time. She is now managing this process in the school leadership, the development of the school leadership pipeline and the school leadership work. She is new to the role. She was on the last PEP. So we're working with her to build out a pipeline and to bring back the AP cohort. I don't know so we used to run 2 pipeline programs for the principal role. There was new leaders, which is new leaders, and then we had an internal group of APs here who wanted to be principals, and we led that process. That went away under the last CEO.
Yeah.
We're bringing it back, and she will be managing that. So we're excited about that.
That's great.
We stopped offering an AP assessment, and that happened again under the last administration. So we are redeveloping that. So right now there's not really a process to be an AP because we knew we were going to lay off, so we didn't put anybody on the PEP. But there's not even an eligibility pool for those people right now because the assessment ended a year ago or 2 years ago. So we are developing that again too. What was interesting is that even for all the talk about the budget scenario and the layoffs is that we didn't experience a decrease in people who were interested in the position. So we feel confident that the interest will remain and the district will still be able to choose from the highest quality people. Like, I'm not worried about that. We are trying to move principal selection up a little bit so that we're not putting people on the PEP late. And again, we did a really good job this year of doing it early, but trying to do it early enough so like if we do the 21st century schools in February, if we do some of the schools that we know people are going to leave, like if we just do them early enough so people can actually plan the budget process, like that's the goal that we've struggled to do in the past, given the way that we sort of staff schools. But I'm not worried about interest. I'm not worried about people not wanting to be in the role. If anything, I think that we need to reaffirm our commitment to develop internal talent as opposed to letting internal talent just sort of, some people just rise and some people don't. And we had that commitment a couple years ago. That commitment left, and we are bringing that commitment back.
I really appreciate that. I've had folks reach out to me who've gone through traditional pipelines to become a principal and want that sort of AP role and didn't know how to insert in that process last year, so I really appreciate the thoughtfulness behind that. I also think I've heard lots of concern from people saying, I'm not a new leader, so therefore I'm not going to get a position or I'm not going to have a process where I can be developed into that role. So I really, I forgot that Principal 4 was going in that role, so that's fantastic. Thank you.
What was my question around? I just forgot my question. Sorry, I was interested in Roxanne 4, so it'll come back. Yeah, good question.
And Commissioner Iacob, the last thing I'll say is that we are also, Principal 4 is working through a reflection on the Principal Assessment Center. So I don't know how familiar you are with assessment centers in general for principals, but normally there's like an assessment of people's instructional ability. There's like a fit piece, and then there's like a data piece. Like those are the three buckets sort of across the country. We've not substantively changed ours in the past, 5-7 years. So we're doing like a big deep dive on it right now to make sure that it is really set. Because some of the feedback that we've heard is a principal will be like, my AP is a star, and then they'll just like bomb the assessment center. And if you don't pass the assessment center, you're not in the pool. So we want to make sure that we're calibrated. So she just led last week a focus group of principals around it. She's leading a couple other focus groups of other people who've been involved in this process so that we can make sure it's the right tool to calibrate us for next year.
That's actually something I would love. I know we have another, we just approved the calendar. If you could, we've talked about the assessment center and how it's going to be revamped. If we could bring that to the next teacher and school leader pipeline update as a part of the presentation, that would be great. Like what the assessment center does more deeply, and then like the changes you guys are thinking about. It's not for another 6 months or so, but that would be great because I think that's key. My next question is around, I remember my question on the model teacher pathway, like what, and this would be for the next presentation as well. I know leader and teacher leadership and school leadership is one of our priorities. I guess for me, what I feel like we do a pretty good job of, in isolation, different programs that we're developing, like you said, but it's not clear about how it all fits together and how we're growing and developing people. So it's kind of like the way I think about it is a kind of the career lattice for I know that's a word that's everyone's using instead of career ladder, career lattice, because it doesn't mean that everyone's going up. And that by the end of the day, like what are the growth opportunities for our teachers and school people that are growing, leading, and developing? And how are we? So it would be great on that next the next presentation to kind of understand where we are, knowing full well, because me as a board member realizes that that's the growth and development and investment we need to make in people to grow and develop them to be successful, right? And wherever they want to go. So if there's a model teacher, what is their next step? Like now my wife is in my ear saying, keep them in the classroom, like keep on helping up other teachers be better. That is one pathway that they could continue. But how are we growing and developing them? How are we offering them, though, for those who want to have an expanded role and impact and think about administration, where is their options? What you just said is our aspiring APs who aren't really there yet. What are we doing for them? Knowing that when I've asked this question before, there has been a little defensiveness saying we're doing a lot for everybody. Well, we're not, like, because we've had really tough budget times too, right? So where are there gaps and where do we think we need to fill? Because this actually, growing and developing people takes money, but I think, DeRay, your idea of like also internally we need to invest in our people is right on. So like it's kind of like our analysis of where we are on the career lattice and where are we doing okay and where are there major gaps that we need to fill in and think about how do we resource that. And we either resource that internally or we go and think about philanthropic funds to help us support that, right? But to me, that's the picture that I'd love to be able to kind of understand more as we're trying to figure out the next stage of the work for us. And I think it fits into our blueprint too.
Yeah, can I add to that? I think it's also not just growing and developing teachers, but also growing and developing our current principals, right? We know that we have principals who are rock stars. We know we have principals who are struggling. We know we have principals who are sort of in the middle who would like to do better, who would like to be a transformational principal, who would like to have that sort of bump up. But I don't think we've really been thoughtful in the past about how to help those principals get to that place. So I think it's not just a teacher strategy, but it's also a principal strategy of how do we sort of help them move forward. And then what do we do? We made this transformational principal position, and we really haven't done much with it, right? In terms of like mentoring and coaching other principals. And I know we have this great new model with Commodore and whatnot, but like, how do we make that what's the next step in that, right? And how do we get those sort of other principals become transformational principals and be able to mentor and use that effectively?
We can definitely come back with that second piece. Do you want to, and Allison, this is looking to you and also saying to you, Commissioner Canham, is to set the expectations around the assessment center is that there are, what we can publicly say about it so that it remains an assessment center is pretty minimal. So the components are probably not going to change. There's going to be an instructional component, there's going to be a data component, there's going to be an interview, and there's going to be something around fit.
Good point.
We can figure out if there's going to be like something that we can show you the components. I don't think that we would do that publicly though.
Yeah. What I was also wondering, we've done different field trips as a teaching and learning committee. Maybe someone could audit the process. Is that something
Yes,
like we could
yes.
sit in on and see and be? You've been an assessor. I know you've been an assessor. So you wouldn't need it. And I used to be the new leader. I used to run the new leaders process, which I know some of the components were. So I know, but I don't know how it's tailored, how it's been tailored over time.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
I
So
think
maybe
we're
that's a
happy
way to do that.
Roxanne's actually in the back of the room,
Oh,
so
she is?
in case, I don't know if she has anything to add, but I think
Okay.
that as Roxanne works on, reformatting the process, I think we'd be happy to have board input into that by
And I will say,
having an audit it.
there's no gold standard right now. So when I was in Minneapolis, we went through an audit of the best places that are doing this
Right.
too, because we were redoing ours. And even the way, I think that we have one of the more aggressive standards for instruction that, like, knowing instruction means something here that is a disqualifier if you can't do it, whereas that is not the case in some other places. I think that what everybody's trying to figure out is how do you assess leadership of adults is something that, like, I think most of the assessment centers test instructional ability and they test sort of like culture enough. I think that nobody is testing can you lead adults well, like that just outside of like an interview being like, hello, tell me about a time where you've led it, like a scenario based question. So we've been, and that Roxanne's been working on it, and I know districts across the country have been trying to figure that out. In Minneapolis we tested this like budget exercise where principals got a budget and they and like that didn't work. Camden does, like, there are districts that are trying innovative stuff, but the only things that we know work are the instruction piece, the culture piece, the data piece, but I think if we can figure out how to test the, like, can you lead adults piece, I think that would actually be a model for places around the country because nobody's doing that well.
Ms. Chinnia?
I think what you're describing, and I'm sort of addressing yours and what Commissioner McKee said, Tina, it's the practical piece in between, because the experience at the assessment center is only successful if something has happened prior to being there. And that's the piece that I think is missing. Too often, we have folks that are in the role of assistant principal. There is nothing that happens at the school that prepares them to be anything other than, and in some cases, one activity in that role for many years. And so I think it also bears looking at the role. I mean, if it's the transformational principal, if it's any principal with an assistant, what are the kinds of things that need to happen practically at the school that prepare those folks, if they're interested in moving on to become for the principalship, to even go to the assessment center? Because if you've never done it at the schoolhouse, you're suddenly not going to go into a room, with these exercises about doing a budget, and you've only been the person that's been the discipline person for 5 years. That's just not going to happen magically. So I think it bears looking at the whole role of the principal in terms of helping to develop the assistant principal role.
And this will be the first time that we have committed to a pipeline outside of a grant process. So we did this whole thing with NOIS, if you remember the NOIS grant. We did this, then we got Wallace, but this is an internal commitment because we think it's important, not as a part of a grant process, which does make this different. That we are and I led the NOIS stuff, was a part of the Wallace work. And what is exciting about that is that we get to do it not in response to an RFP or like to meet some metrics that somebody else has made. We get to do it because we think it's the right way. So I'm excited to see what we can do.
Can I make a request, DeRay? I'm back on the calendar. We have an update on teacher and school leaders in February. And so could that be more of, instead of the update on attrition and the teachers and principals, like what is our basically our career lattice, like that? And I can talk more about what that presentation could look like, but it's more around the development of people and what are we providing people, the different people within our organization, where the gaps are, would be really helpful.
Yep. And in February, again, because of the RIF, how do I say this? In October, if enrollment declines, then we will be faced with the staffing situation in October that we will need to figure out in October, but it'll also change the landscape of everything for the next year. And we will, in February, know that better. So we will be talking through that sort of stuff. It won't be a traditional sort of here are the numbers. It will be what are we going to do for the next year, given that we are projecting that positions will continue to decline for the next 2 or so years at the BTU, just to flag for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I guess that would be an important part. But I think there is this strategic piece of like, okay, what are we putting in place to develop the teachers and leaders across the board?
Yeah.
That would be helpful as well. Awesome. So I actually had I have a question on we're going to transition to procurement now, right? We're good, AJ? I actually had a question that I know I'm going to ask you guys. So, do we have to have that? It has to do with principal onboarding, the BKL consulting contract. So can I just go ahead and ask them here while they're there? Are you guys the right people on BKL?
No.
Okay, forget it. I thought I was trying to be efficient with time. I thought there's a principal onboarding question that I had questions. I thought I just wanted your input and guidance around.
So academics works so I believe that is around some academic onboarding. And the way that we currently split the work is that we do all the pipeline, we do all the get them here, develop them, make sure it works for them to be in the role. And then the chief of school's office and CEO's office manages their sort of in-role development at the macro level.
So the onboarding the first year principals in the position is not in your.
So Roxanne's role assists in that, but the strategic vision for it is a collaboration between 3 offices. It's not just one office managing it.
Okay.
Before you all get up, I just need to say thank you to all of you, your entire team, for the hard work you've put in this year, for the layoffs, the right size of the HR office. I mean, you really have done a phenomenal job, and I just want to thank all 3 of you. But then, Mr. McKesson, I want to thank you specifically for coming in for an interim role for 2 months potentially, and literally staying for the entire year. We could not have done this year without you. We're going to miss you tremendously, and I just want to say I respect and admire the work that you've done for the district. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, procurement. I do feel like, Mr. Parker, we want to have you introduce them like these and just run through each one to see if there are questions. So if you want to start with the YouthWorks one.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm Jeff Parker, Director of Procurement for the school system. The first procurement item is 9.01. This is a contract with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. The contract amount is $209,395. Supports the YouthWorks summer program here at the schools, where we recruit approximately 60 students to work for us over the summer. Request the board's approval, or any questions?
Yeah, my only question is, it's already started, and why is it coming so late? Why haven't we approved this earlier?
It's really the timing of the program and getting all the cost components together. It's also the calendar usually. The board only has one meeting per month over the summer and things like that. So it's more a coordination effort between the school district and the city government to identify all of these students. You'll see there are a few of these that have similar circumstances with them as we go through the agenda.
But is it something that can be avoided next year? Like, could we look at this in May
Certainly.
of next year to approve before June? I mean, that's the goal, but anyway, what are the
Absolutely.
barriers for making that happen from our
Yeah,
end?
we're more than sensitive to the board's desire to have these contracts approved beforehand.
Okay. But I don't have any other questions.
The next contract is with, is a contract requested by Coppin Academy in the amount of $40,000 to provide professional development. This contract came to us in May of 2017 to provide these services for the prior fiscal year. The contract term is September through June 1st of 2017. And the school is paying for these services out of their own budget.
Any questions? No questions on that one.
The next contract is with BKL and Associates to provide consulting services to continue professional development for new principals and onboarding, as well as onboarding for new principals and professional development and coaching. This is a continuation of their current contract, which expired on June 30th. The contract amounts $256,250.
Yeah, so that was I have a series of questions on that, so I say James wrote that up, so it's coming up. I guess it's like, who is BKL? Who is providing the services? They have a $2,000 rate per coach, which seems high. I know that they've been effective with I like seeing the retention of 19 out of 20 first-year principals, but the question is, outside of Baltimore and that one, what else have they been accomplished? I just don't know who they are and what group they are, so if you could shed some light on
Thanks,
BKL.
Commissioner. I'm Jim Brennan. I'm Executive Assistant to the Chief of Staff. The program that was instituted by Dr. Barkley, who has worked previously for city schools and other consulting work, as well as other districts, is actually several-fold. One is focused on the first-year principals, including the onboarding in the summer, the boot camp in the fall, seminars throughout the year, and then one-on-one coaching. In addition, last year, they involved 16 second-year principals, primarily in the seminars and heavily on the one-to-one coaching. You've mentioned the 95% retention in first year. It was 94% of the second-year principals. The ILEDs who work with the principals all reported very favorable results. And I think some of the strongest results beyond the objective data is the anecdotal evidence that we've looked at, where we've actually received several letters from first-year principals talking about how valuable it was to them. The second year, what is now the second-year principals, has specifically asked whether this was going to be continued because they found it to be very valuable. I think the advantage to the first-year principals is fairly obvious in terms of just finding out the practical aspects of central office, which, as we all know, can be maze-like at times, and getting into the systems, the reporting, and everything else. But all of the anecdotal evidence and the objective evidence points to the value of these one-to-one coaching sessions, because the principals have expressed, the number one thing they expressed was the importance of a safe place where they can air frustrations and ask questions. You know, the ILEDs, they're reporting to more or less, the upper levels of this district they're reporting to, they felt that it was extremely valuable, and that was in both cohorts, to have this safe place where they could talk in confidence to Dr. Barclay or one of the coaches. And
So I'm totally on board with the need for the work
right.
and the safe space of understanding the work, the onboarding. It all sounds great. So can you just say a little bit about Dr. Barclay, who she is, and it's not just her doing the work. There's a bunch of. It seems like there's other coaches. It's all going to be about the quality of the coach.
She's brought in 2 additional coaches, all of whom have at least 2 years' experience in mentoring at the leadership level. I don't have their names.
Yeah. Is that something you could provide, Jim, before?
I can absolutely provide you
just
with
the
that
resumes,
and
of
the
who
full
are the
resume
coaches,
of
because that's
Dr.
really
Barclay.
important. Who's doing the work with our principals? That would be helpful. The other question that I have is around. You said there's a boot camp. There is a just understanding that beyond this, that there's seminars that first and second year principals can attend.
That they do attend, yeah, but in addition, they
There's-
get monthly one-on-one coaching.
Month-on-one coaching. But then you said something about a boot camp. There is a boot camp.
There is a boot camp in the fall
for
where.
everybody first and second year.
Yes. The onboarding summer obviously is for the first year, but that's where they get more into reporting and things of that nature.
Mhm.
So it's a multi-layered program.
Dr. Barclay was on our transition team when Dr. St. Felicitas first started. She's been, she has a lot of experience both in the district and with working at leadership levels, with leadership in other districts as well. I think she has, as Jim said, I think we've gotten very positive feedback from principals about how valuable they've found this to be. I think one of the challenges we've had in the past is that principals who, seem promising but just don't get the support they need to be successful. And so we're trying to make sure that we are, our, schools are hard places to work, and we have some particularly challenging schools. So trying to make sure that our principals have that support when they first come in. And the ILED span of control is large enough where it's just difficult to provide the level of support that a new principal really needs. So I think we've considered this to be valuable and made a big difference for those with the success of those early principals from last year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm just like, this is so important. Like, it's like, are we getting the right return on investment? Do we feel like, I'm just also wondering in my mind, are there other indicators we can put in place to see how effective it is besides they're retained, which is ultimately a goal, but then like, are the schools moving? How do we know it's working? This isn't critical of the BKL. It's just like, we just talked about development, and this is like, other board members are asking, the new principals, the 20 that are coming in, how are we making sure we're taking care of them? How do we make sure we're putting the right investments in them? But I guess the other question I'd have, Jim, is just you had mentioned, just a scope and sequence. Is that something that's easy? Like you said there's monthly coaching, there's seminars, and I also think it's really important that they're including first and second year principals. Are they separate sessions, or are they joint?
I believe they're joint.
They're joint. So everyone's invited. There'd be like,
Oh, yeah.
this year there'd be 40.
And
people.
this year, the chief of schools office, I don't have a firm number yet, is also going to third-year principals selected, but they haven't given me that number yet.
That these same coaches, the
Yes.
same organization would use with these dollars?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
But I'll be happy to provide you with her full resume. I should have brought it. I didn't
Yeah.
have it here.
And just, I don't want to create anything, if there's a scope of the seminars, like the frequency, that would be helpful.
Sure.
As well. Thanks.
Great.
Any other questions on PKO? That was my one.
Do you want that before tonight's vote? I
That'd be
think?
helpful, yeah.
Can I guess I was out when we talked about YouthWorks and the timing of YouthWorks. Can I just say that I totally get the issue on the timing. I think this year was just an unusual year in that because we didn't know whether we were going to do YouthWorks given the financial challenges we had. So we just didn't know whether we were doing it at what scope we were doing it until fairly late. So we were just a little bit behind where we normally are. We value the program and we'll definitely prioritize getting it in earlier. It just was a later year in general.
It was our issue.
Yeah, we were just a little bit slower.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, somebody in my house was bothering me about it every now and then.
I know, that must have been hard for you. But there's no question there. I mean, I just want to make sure are there barriers we can overcome to make sure we approve
No,
it?
it really was, we just, we
Yeah.
were trying to decide what we had the bandwidth to do, given what was going on.
Great, thanks. Next.
The next contract, 9.04, this is an amendment to this year's community schools agreement, just to accurately reflect the partners in the respective schools that they worked with as well as their costs. There's a net reduction to the contract overall of $10,000.
Commissioner Highcup.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Just two quick questions. One, this is all school-based funds. These are funds coming out of direct school budgets, correct?
This is all school-based funds except for the one contribution that's made to the Family League.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Secondly, this is not on this particular contract, but we're amending this. It's this current year. It closed June 30th.
Yep.
Where's the one for the upcoming school year? Why are we not seeing that one yet? Given that we're about to start a new school year and that term starts July 1, to your question before about the timing of things, where are we with that? When will we see that? Because we're now starting a new year and we have a contract for the new year.
Is anybody here from community schools?
Sorry, Mr. Parker. I can't answer that.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Shayna McIver. Thanks. I'm Shayna McIver, the Family Involvement Manager in the Engagement Office. We are awaiting confirmation from the Family League. There's still negotiations with the city around the funding for community schools, so our partners haven't even gotten their award letters. But my office has been working closely with Katie in procurement, who's the buyer, and we have a draft based on what last year's match amounts were, but we're waiting for the Family League to give us confirmation to go.
So maybe we anticipate that at the August teaching learning committee, we would see the item.
I hope so. I was just told yesterday that they would reach out to us next week.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, great.
Thank
Just
you.
reminding Commissioner Hubbard, we're going to be talking about, we're doing our new system today. At 5 o'clock, we're coming down. We're going to talk about the consent. We're going to hear public, then we're going to vote on it. So I'm just taking good notes on what we're talking about to share with the committee. Okay, next.
The next contract is the upcoming school year for the 10 community centers. The contract amount is $830,943. Entirely by funds and grants for the community centers.
Jeff, I'm sorry, I think your microphone's off. You have to repeat that. None of that's on the record.
Item 10.01 is a contract to provide services at 10 of Baltimore City's Judy Centers. The estimated contract amount is $830,943 and paid entirely by FY18 Judy Center grants.
Go ahead. Commissioner Hubbard.
Thank you. This contract right now is paid for out of the MSDE grants. Are these the funds starting next year or the year after that we are responsible for? I've never seen a breakdown like this before in terms of the costs, so I'm just curious, are these what I'm looking forward to for the budget for FY 19 or 20 that the district is going to pay for directly?
Hello.
Crystal Francis, I'm in the Office of Early Learning. These funds are all paid for from the grant monies from the federal government, the state, and the state government. And we also receive money from the Baltimore Community Foundation that goes to the state, but then back here to the city.
Right, and we understand that. Our question, though, is we understand that at a certain point, these funds are going to be district responsible. And I think I'm the only one that's been paying attention to this really tightly, and I'm leaving. So I want to make sure all these folks know to ask those
I was going to ask that question. I had that question. When do we take responsibility for the Judy Center?
Every year we
She's drilled
do
it into my head.
Every year with the Judy Center grant, we've been told that in a year, 2, 3 years, for whatever, I want to know where we are. If you can't answer it now, that's fine. But for tonight's, before we approve this, I just want the board to be fully aware that at some point, the district's going to bear the burden of the cost of this. So as we build up the Judy Center strategy, I think it's a necessary and great strategy. But my concern is we make sure we understand there's a cost implication in the future. While it's being paid for right now out of another grant, we're going to pay for this eventually. So help me understand where we are in that process.
So right now for school year 18, there will be 3 Judy Centers that will only be receiving half of the funding. So the other half of the funding will be paid for by city schools. And so city schools is responsible for paying for the salaries of the 2 staff persons. And then the money that they are still receiving from the state pays for the rest of the contracts and programming and everything else.
And that's not a school-based budget question, that's a district budget question,
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
So that would be helpful. So like how many schools right now that are being covered, and then how many, what's our responsibility? You're saying for this
Yes,
budget
for
year?
school year 18,
For year 18, so we've already approved that budget.
yes.
So then, and then school year 19, do we have, is it kind of a gradual? I think that's what Commissioner Highcupboard's wondering too. Do we have a greater responsibility for the following year?
Yes, so next year, the 5 newest Judy Centers that were brought on a few years ago, their staff persons will be the responsibility of the district. So this year, it's 6 staff persons, and then next year, it's going to be an additional 10, so it'll be 16
16
total.
people.
Yes.
And cost, what's the projected cost for 19?
Oh, my.
It comes out to be about $165,000 per Judy Center, because each Judy Center has 2 of those full-time staff.
Would it be
So-
possible to get
You're talking about close to
those
$1 million
details in the schedule
investment.
to the board before tonight's vote?
Yeah,
Yes.
that'd be really helpful. What we're trying to, together, everybody, trying to just make sure the board understands our responsibility to keep these going and what's our financial responsibility as we approve that. So yeah, just like it seems like it'd be a really easy chart to kind of just put together. It'd be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we're making big bets about what works for kids and what we want to do moving forward, we're talking about close to $1 million investment moving forward, and the board should be saying, yes, we want to do that $1 million investment, and I know that there's potential to even grow the strategy from this point, so let's be very clear about what that means for us moving forward. And just to clarify, what I understand this is that the community foundation funds are the ones that are going away, the state grants are the ones that are staying, is that correct? So we're not covering the burden of the full cost of these centers ever. It's really the state funds are remaining in the, am I wrong?
No, that's correct.
Okay, I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next contract, 10.02, represents 2 agreements. The first is with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development to continue a credit recovery program for 9th and 10th graders at Youth Opportunity Academy. The other goes along with that, is a second contract to lease the space where the services are provided at Lafayette Avenue for $1. Seek the board's approval on that. Or any questions?
I'm scrolling down. 1002. I don't have any questions on this. Thank you for,
Welcome. The next contract is 10.03. It's with the Baltimore City Health Department to provide nursing services for the upcoming fiscal year. The contract is for 1 year with 2 one-year renewal options. City Schools' contribution this year is $410,325. while the city of Baltimore's contribution is $16,216,922. Any questions?
I'm just curious how we decide which schools get these services and which schools do not. It's only covering a certain number of our schools, so I'm just curious how we make those critical decisions on access.
Every school in the city gets nursing services. Okay, I'm Louise Fink, and I'm Director of Home and Hospital and Health Services. And every school in the system receives nursing services.
So that means every school has a full-time nurse staffed at the school, or how is that, what does that look like then?
All
for our
right, every
district?
school has a full-time staff member from the Baltimore City Health Department. Some of the schools have a health aide who are supervised by a nurse and a nurse part-time. Some of them have a nurse full-time, depending on the size of the school. So, for example, all of our high schools have full-time nurses, whereas many of our elementary schools have a trained health aide who is supervised by a nurse who is there 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay. And then on the rest of the contract, oral health is mentioned as well as vision and reading project, but I guess those are the numbers where it's the decreased number of students being served. Are those part of this contract, or are they just reported out as other services we're offering as part of the health services?
They're reported out as part of services that are being offered, and they are all at no cost to the system. Both the oral health project, which serves thousands of students every year with dental services, and the Vision to Learn program, which has given out about 2,700 pair of glasses this year, are at no cost to the system.
Okay, great.
I had a question. Can you just remind us again how the city schools contribution and the city of Baltimore's contributions has flipped over the years? I mean, essentially, we used to give 12 million, now we give 410,000. The city gave 3 million, now they're giving 16 million. How has that worked?
That's an interesting question. Part of what was going on this year was that the city of Baltimore was giving additional funding to the city school system, and as part of that additional funding, one of the additional amounts they had given was funding to support the city nursing contract.
So this was part of the package of resources that we got from the state and city when we went to Annapolis this year. So the 60 million, 59.4 million that we got in this year, part of it was this nursing contribution. So the city, the city, and both the city and the state gave us a combination of resources in the form of cash and services. This was one of the services that was committed to.
Yeah, I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. Now, are we
It's good
bridged
information
there?
for the public too.
Yeah, we should bring that up today when we are in front of the public. Is that, am I right to assume for 2 years when we did the 3-year bridge to Kerwin? Like, if we get the same amount of resources for the next 2 years with the same level come in 19 and 20?
So the range of the amount of the city's contribution increases over time, and what services are providing changes a little bit, but I'm pretty sure this is one that holds constant, but I can double check.
Okay, that's helpful. I just want to, again, know what our burden would be, what our financial responsibility would be to continue this level of service. Okay. That was my question. Are you okay? Okay.
The next contract is 10.06 with Didax Educational Materials. It's a 3-year agreement.
There's 10.04, Baltimore School for the Arts
Arts.
Foundation.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
No problem.
The next contract is with Baltimore School for the Arts. The contract term is August 1st through July 31st, 2018, in the amount of $955,689. Of that, $855,689 is allocated to part-time artists and teachers in the high school, and $100,000 is allocated for artist teachers who are instructors at the Twigs after-school and Saturday program.
So I just want to say I appreciate the timeliness of the contract. It hasn't started yet. It's August 1st, like yay, we're on time with this. This is great. But I do have just one question that could be answered before tonight we approve this. And I just want to make sure this matches the budget allocation that we made. For some reason, this is seeming higher to me than what we agreed to when we replaced the funding back. It's back to the $1 million mark, and I didn't think we had that much money in the budget onset. So if someone could just, we originally went to 5, and then there was a greater number that was that, but traditionally it was $1 million annually. I didn't know that we got back up to the $1 million. I just want to make sure this is aligning with budget, that's all.
I'll check.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Where's the funding come for this again? This is central.
Us.
This is us, right? No, I know, the
Comes from the general fund.
general fund, yep.
The next contract is 10.05 with Didex Educational Materials to purchase mathematic manipulative kits to support our math curriculum. The cost of the contract is $1.35 million, and the term is for 3 years, commencing July 26.
I think the key here is it connects to the new curriculum that we're rolling out in math. So it's for, I mean, I know that states it later on, but that's my understanding. These are supporting manipulatives to the curriculum that we already adopted, so.
That's correct. The next contract is...
And wait,
Sorry.
did you have a question about it's
I'm
individuals?
just saying, just to note that individual schools are purchasing these.
Mhm. That's correct, right, Mr. Parker? That's what it says, but I just want to.
Hi, Laura Jones, manager for teaching and learning. That's correct. So this would be for individual schools to purchase based on their individual needs.
Right, so you adopt the curriculum, you decide whether you want to buy these manipulatives that are aligned to the curriculum. Okay.
Yeah, and to be clear with that, most of these materials schools already have. So this would be, if a school needs to replenish something, but these aren't, brand new. These are the same types of manipulatives that schools have been using to teach math for several years now. So most of our schools already have these on hand, but they may need to replenish, they may need to order certain items. This vendor provides them sort of a la carte as needed, but then they also provide them aligned to the curriculum. So if a school is adding a grade 4 classroom, they can actually go and purchase a kit that is everything that they would need to teach Eureka Math for that grade 4 classroom.
I don't have any other questions.
The next contract is 10.06. It's a one-year agreement with the Ingenuity Project and the total cost of $394,050. Services are provided at 4 schools: Hamilton Elementary, Middle, Mountain Royal, and Baltimore Poly, and Roland Park Elementary Middle. The contract term is August 1st through July 31, 2018.
So this is a year-to-year contract, right?
This has been an ongoing program for several years
Mhm.
at these 4 schools.
Questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Parker. I've heard rumblings of people concerned that this contract was decreased this year. It's a highly sought-after program. Can you just explain, we've had budget cuts across the board. I wish the public to understand what happened here if we have a decrease from this year to last year, and a reasonable explanation for why that occurred.
Hi, Laura O'Hanian, Director of Differentiated Learning. There is a decrease from the central allocation. So the school allocation matches the enrollment, and so that adjusted. But the central office allocation that comes from the central budget was decreased by 10%, which is standard for the other programs that we saw a decrease because of funding.
And necessary, given that we had to cut
Oh,
the rest of the
absolutely.
budget. This is not I feel like I've heard from people this is a targeted Ingenuity, or folks didn't like Ingenuity or whatnot, but really this is about the district having to cut our budget across the board, and this being one of those many things that had to be cut accordingly across the board. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's right. We had to make a lot of difficult decisions in the budget this year. We are very pleased with the work that the Gifted and Advanced Learning Office has been doing to expand those options across the city, and Ingenuity is one of the key options that we offer. But we had to make a lot of difficult decisions that all of our schools experienced cuts, and most of our programs experienced cuts. So that was just part of that
Yeah, I think it's
overall
important
landscape.
for folks to know that, because we have certain folks that can advocate for things that other folks can't advocate for, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands this was across the board. This wasn't a targeted cut for one program. I have an additional question, though. Under the goals, it talks about increasing the number of seats by 100 by the 2020 school year. Are we talking about more seats in the same schools, or are we talking about additional offerings in other locations in our city? I just think this is a highly sought-after program, and I know that if we're making an investment in it and we're paying for a portion of the program, we want to see more of our kids having access, not the same kids having more access. So can we talk about that just for a moment, or
Sure.
if you're not ready for it, that's fine, because it's not germane to this contract. I just saw it listed here, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Can I add on, because it is a bigger question that I just want to know, and I don't know when you can talk about it, like, I just want to piggyback a little bit. What's the overall vision that we see within differentiated teaching and learning? About where does Ingenuity fit in, and how do we want to support that? And my same question about options around the city, and based on what we learned from our report, it was my same question. But ultimately, I want to know, like, are we looking to build this and expand it, or keep it where it's at?
Well, it says expanding in the contract. That's why I asked.
But it's a 1-year contract. Is that that's the
But it
goal
has
of the
goal for
organization?
2020, yeah.
But
So-
like, we're only funding this for 1 year.
Okay, great. So I will do my best to try to answer both questions. So the vision, I will say that Ingenuity is key for us as a partner for providing gifted and advanced programming to students. They are experts in this STEM programming, and the internship opportunities alone that the high school students that are in the Ingenuity program receive are invaluable. They are a great partner. I actually sit on the board as the district representative, so we are able to work together. And I think you should take a close look at the mission and vision of Ingenuity, because that has been adjusted this school year, to really have a lens for equity and focus on supporting students. And if you look really carefully at some of the components of the board letter, it's a little different this year, and it talks about some of the recruitment efforts. So they did a recruitment effort with Cecil, Furman, Templeton, and Matthew Henson to try to help start some early recruiting of students for Mount Royal's class. And we really strongly support that. So Cecil obviously has a really strong gifted program. Having those students have a pathway to Ingenuity is fantastic. And they've done a great job sort of adjusting the entrance criteria to better align to gifted best practices and eliminate some of the sort of components that in the research suggest could cause bias, right? Like teacher recommendations. So they've done some adjustments that I would say are very strong. And we, as a board member, I was able to sort of help guide, and they are true partners to us. So that I'll start with that. The vision around the extra 100 seats, it's a little hard because we're in conversation right now, so it's a little hard for me to talk about it in this public venue. But I do think the conversation is thinking about what are sort of the other options? Where are we looking at? And as a district, we're already looking at middle school programming, right? So that's been a focus area of Dr. Santelisa's and has tasked some of us with thinking about that. And I think this will be part of that conversation and thinking about how, as a district, we provide this amazing program to more students.
Particularly to underrepresented students, which is
Absolutely.
what they've identified. So I think the mechanism for how they're going to do that is still a conversation, but I think that's the interest.
Yeah, and I don't want to, as having 3 children go through the program, I can say it's very valuable. But at the end of the day, when I dropped off 3 of my children for the testing day, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of families line up for the testing day because they want to give them the option, showing up at 7:30 in the morning for an all-day test at Poly to try to get this type of option. It shows that there's incredible demand for this. And so whether that's Ingenuity in other places in the city or what they've developed in the hands of other people, I just feel like there's a demand for this. Parents are asking for it, and we need to provide it. And this level of rigor for our families. And yeah, anyway, so I'm just super supportive and thinking, I don't know what the right way to expand, but I just want to figure out how we do that in a way that can give more options for our families who want it.
I just want to add to that. We recognize that the gifted office is expanding in general, so I appreciate the thoughtfulness behind that for the district. I just think we're making big bets as a board with budgeting. We just talked about Judy Centers earlier, right? We're saying if that investment, the early childhood matters to the district, and then it makes a difference for kids when they hit kindergarten that they're ready for school, right? So for me, this is another big bet that we want to make about sort of our advanced learners, our gifted learners, and how do we advance them even more and get more access to kids who are, as Alice said, underrepresented. So that's why I'm asking the questions. I just think it's something we need to really think about how we're investing our dollars and where, so.
Yeah, and I will say that they have added additional seats at Mount Royal and Poly this school year. So and that's in an effort to open up more opportunities for students.
Could I also say that I do know that they are open, and I want to congratulate them, because what we're looking at here is an example of an expansion that has taken place with Ingenuity. So I do know that they are open to talking with us, and as you said, good partners in terms of trying to meet the needs of our young people.
Yeah, can you, I'm sorry, I heard from the audience 60, but can you break that down for me? How many kids do you know?
Yeah, so there should be, and I can pull it up just to make sure.
I just have the numbers here. It's 225 for high school.
There was additional 30 seats at Poly and an additional class at Mount Royal.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So an additional 30 seats at Mount Royal. That's
Yeah.
great. Mm-hmm.
Okay, next, Buck,
Thank you.
thank you.
The next contract is a 3-year agreement with Buck Institute for Education to provide professional development, coaching, and materials to support project-based learning training. The contract term is July 26th through July 25th of 2020. Total contract amount is $293,635.50.
I guess, Don, are they good at this, and how do you know? Like, well, that's it. I mean, I know they focus on project-based learning. I just don't know how good they are, and how did you determine that this is the best group to use for professional development?
So one, High Tech High uses them, and many of the other prestigious schools across the country use them as a basis for all of their projects. Two, myself, Janice Lane, and Sharonda Ely went to the training ourselves and participated in a 3-day one-on-one training. And in our opinion, it was very high quality, and we, again, they're premier in terms of their research, proprietary in many of the elements. And so we felt that we wanted to, for project-based learning, we wanted to do it at a high level. And so the design practices as well as the teaching practices were just stellar in our opinion. And I mean, that's the bottom line.
And who gets this? Who would get this again?
So for this summer, we're targeting our 21st century schools that have identified as being project-based learning as their academic focus for next year, as well as some of our 21st century schools that are moving in and out. So for example, Forest Park has identified as being a STEAM school. However, we will do a STEAM training and then roll right into the PBL STEAM Academy, and then the next 3 days PBL training, project-based learning training, so that their projects will be focused on STEAM.
Gotcha.
Just on that particular statement, so we're funding the project-based learning training for the 21st century schools. Are then we also funding other choices that schools are making, like STEAM and other things, that training for those as well?
Yes. However, in those instances, because it's not as large of an investment, we don't have this type of a contract at this point.
Okay.
They're much more, that they're smaller, and for example, the STEAM training is a 1-day academy that will happen prior to this, and so it's a lot of different entities that are involved.
So I guess my general question, though, is as we onboard these new schools and we're making sort of, again, strategic investments, we are then sort of funding the schools to get training or supports to implement these new programs that they're identifying that the school community wants for their students.
Absolutely, and we're also doing some of the training where applicable in-house. So, for example, we're doing technology training for all of the schools as they move into the school in terms of how to use the new devices, how to use them. So we'll integrate how to use them for project-based learning, which potential applications might really support this approach. And so we're customizing that, but that's happening through district office staff.
And I just want to say that I appreciate that Dawn is in this role. We flagged when these schools first came on board that we needed to make sure we had not only brand-new buildings, but also new programs that reflected sort of innovative learning and 21st century practices and whatnot. So moving forward, not for tonight's vote by any stretch of the imagination, but if you could keep us abreast sort of where the schools are when they're deciding what programs or curriculum they'd like to do, and that so we know sort of what's being aligned with when they open, what's happened with that school, what's the new school going to look like, what the schools choices they've made, that kind of thing. I think it'd be really helpful for the board to have just an understanding of that.
Absolutely, and we did share where we were back in June, and we can certainly do that along the way.
Yeah, I think it's a rolling, yeah.
It should be a recurring item on the teaching and learning agenda, and we've been doing it. We did it just June. Did we do it once before that? I feel like since I've been here, we did another update as well.
We did, in terms of full board, we did it in June. We have not done a presentation for teaching and learning committee.
Okay.
But it is on for next year in June, so we may want to do something earlier.
And it could be just a quick update, or it could be a paper production without having to do a lot of time. But I think the board should be really aware of what's coming up, because it's really great stuff.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is Activate Learning, which is a $4.5 million contract. To bring everyone's attention to it over 5 years on our science, instructional materials, reusable equipment, professional development for teachers. So it's a really big item that I want just to talk through. So just give everyone a minute to read over it, and if the appropriate people come up. This is our middle school science programs that's aligned to the next generation science standards. So do we have questions? No. Okay, my one question is, are we sure it's good? I know I've read the panels, I read the quip that you guys used to quip to kind of evaluate it. It's just like, to me, I always get a little anxious. It's a big dollar amount, and that we've rolled out different things, and so I guess just a couple minute perspective on why this is the way to go.
Hello, I'm Joshua Gabriels. I'm the science coordinator. What's really excellent about this is we've actually been piloting it for a year in 10 of our schools. So we've had an opportunity to see our teachers and our students using it. Khalil Dasak, back when he was in the district, called it a home run. That school, Hampton, has chosen to invest very heavily in the program and already has invested grades 6 through 8 because they saw the value to their students. So we've had really positive feedback from teachers. We've had very positive feedback from students, and I've been able to go visit classes in multiple schools and see kids doing science. So when I talk to the students and say, what do you think about it? The number one feedback I get this every student group I talk to, is we like doing science because it's got all the stuff so they can actually figure stuff out for themselves, integrated in with the readings and writing argumentation. Like, this is what we conclude from the evidence. And then they have another experience and they say, oh, but this thing doesn't make sense with our explanation, and they build up their understanding over time. It's a research-based program. The team that developed it has been instrumental in the development of the next generation science standards. It's even been said that it's informed the next generation science standards. And it's only getting better over time. We're expecting the new edition to be coming out that we would be purchasing for 6th grade for next year.
What did you say we're purchasing for 6th grade for this year?
For the 17-18 school year, we'd be doing 6th grade. So it would be 6th grade, year 1, 7th grade, year 2, 8th grade, year 3.
So if I walked into a 6th grade classroom come the fall, we'd see this, we're able to get the materials and train teachers up, so they're going to be rolling this out in 6th grade?
That's the plan.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you I'm excited. I love seeing kids do science.
Me too, thank you.
I'll go see some 6th graders do science.
The next contract is 10.09. This is a 3-year agreement with Educational Tracking and Consulting Incorporated. The contract provides data keeping, management, storage, and reporting of tracking student-related encounters, student-related service encounters.
I don't have any questions. Dr. Berkeley?
Well, I'm just going to show my ignorance, I guess, but can you say that last phrase again?
Sorry, what the tool does is it tracks and reports the related services students receive, such as speech, physical therapy, counseling, and all the rest of it. It tracks all those interactions with a database that allows us to report on those activities.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
Sorry.
Okay, last, it's at 11:01, our last, and what page number of this is the procurement agenda? As I read it, page 55. Okay, let's go to Pearson.
Pearson, section 14.01. This is a one-year contract extension with Pearson in the amount of $355,401. This is to continue the school's enterprise instructional management system.
I don't have any questions on this. Ms. Chinia, Tina? Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your work on putting this together. All right, at 11:01. I think that's it, right? Do we want to, when's the next Teaching and Learning
The
Committee
next
meeting?
Teaching and Learning Committee meeting will be on August 22nd at 9 a.m. in this room.
Awesome. Thank you all for your time.
Adjourned at 11:01.
Wonderful.